Hello. You may have seen the length of this podcast and gone, wow, they really deep dive on those comics. I'm sorry. That's not what happens. This podcast devolves into what might be one of our most tangenty ones yet. It's Chris's fault. Chris is here. He's on the line.
I'm responsible for a few of the tangents, I admit.
A few?
Yeah. But the main thing is, should we quickly give the link? Oh, and by the way, but happy birthday for yesterday, by the way, mate.
Oh, thanks, Chris. Yeah, that's nice of you to say.
No worries.
That'll become relevant later in the podcast. Don't worry if you're wondering why Chris has made a real point of doing that there. Yeah, we should give the link now. Next episode is going to be our top 5 episodes, but we're going to take a survey of you guys, the listeners, that will allow you to put your 2 cents in, and we'll do an our listeners' top 5 as well. So there's a SurveyMonkey link in the description below if you're watching this on YouTube, or you can get it on my Twitter if you're listening to this on other forms, at Dan Doolan. And you'll be able to rank your top, well, whatever. You can rank as far as you want. Some people have only ranked their top 5. Some people have gone as far as ranking all 170-odd episodes. Please head to that link and do that. The more feedback we get, the more accurate the responses will be, the better they're going to reflect. But the better the top 5 will actually reflect what you guys think. So if you're listening to this podcast and you want to help us out for that, do that. But otherwise, here's the podcast. There is, I think, in there 30-40 minutes, which is what we planned to do on the Steven Universe comic.
I think the rest of it's good stuff too. It's, I think it's fine.
Yeah.
It's entertaining.
It might not be relevant, but it is potentially entertaining. Is that the fairest way to describe the podcast they're about to hear?
Might not be relevant, but potentially entertaining could be the title of every podcast we do. So,
are you saying we should end Nothing But Static as a thing now and just do one podcast going forward called might not be relevant but could be entertaining?
I think you and I both know, Dan, that we'll just continue doing Nothing But Static forever.
Yeah. We're gonna be like old men ranting about how TV was better back in the thousands.
Yeah. Obviously, we're not, Jess isn't pregnant or anything like that at all, but I already know that at some point I'm going to neglect a child to record a podcast with you. Some would take a break. Some would be like, well, we won't do it for a bit, or oh, maybe we need to stop. Whereas I'm just going to not be there.
What I love most about what's happening right now is we're doing a microcosm demonstration of how wrong the podcast we just recorded went. So if
because
this is the intro.
Yeah. Well, then roll that music, birthday boy.
Hello and welcome to Steven University. This week we're finally doing the thing we've promised for multiple episodes and haven't gotten to. We'll take a look at the comics, Chris.
Woo!
That energy is more energy than I have at 10 in the morning.
Woo! I'll carry us both, Dan, except when we actually discuss the comics. Because if you think I don't have anything to say about cartoons... Wait till you hear me try and dissect comics for 45 minutes.
Well, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I wasn't sure when we said to do this, like, sort of what your history of, like, comic books is. I grew up reading Spider-Man comics, mostly, but, like, I was, delved out into the wider world. I've got a ton of X-Men comics and things like that. There's a bunch of stuff I really enjoyed reading when I was younger, but it occurred to me, you don't really strike me as a comics guy, but I've never actually asked you directly. Did you grow up? Did you read much comic book stuff when you were younger? So I didn't want to throw you under the bus and put you on the spot now, but I did want to ask. What is your sort of like history with comic books in general?
Yeah, what's interesting about that, Daniel, is never the X-Men, the Spider-Mans,
Sure.
all the men's and the women's. Your Black Widows, your Wonder Womans. your Captain Marvels. I only know these names from the films.
Sure.
So this is interesting actually, because my answer is different now, having read these. Because having read these, I was reminded of something. So if you'd have asked me that before reading these, I'd have said, I've read. I've tried to read Watchmen and the Infinity Saga. I've read some since as an adult. As a kid, I had the occasional Beano or Dandy, mainly Beano annual, which every kid, in our generation would occasionally get for Christmas and stuff.
I've got a couple of Beano annuals that I still own to this day.
Exactly.
I love a good bit. For those in America who don't know, by the way, Beano is like a comedy comic produced in the UK with like some quite iconic characters, such as the UK Dennis the Menace, which is, in my opinion, the superior Dennis the Menace. But there you go.
Shots fired.
Shots fired. American Dennis
the Menace is classic.
Yeah, and his dog Nasha.
Yeah.
They're the most British thing you've ever seen in your life, and at this point I feel like they really lean into it. I've read some more recent ones and they're really leaning into the Britishness now, because they're just like, well, why not? Anyway, so those are kind of like, they were like, I remember when I was a kid, you get those for like, they were printed cheaply on like the sort of paper you'd get a newspaper printed on. They were like 30p or something like that. They were like, so kids could buy them with pocket money. They were good. They were good for what they were, but they're not like, they're definitely not superhero comics. They're sort of, they're comedy comics. They're intentionally like funny situations and stuff. Like they had a character called Roger the Dodger, whose main goal in life was to get out of doing things. So his parents would want him to mow the lawn, so he'd try to find a clever way of getting the lawn mowed without doing it himself, and then it would go wrong somehow. That sort of japes.
So I read a lot of like magazines which would have occasional comics in, like Power Rangers magazine, but then it very quickly, my memory of what I would rush into the newsagents and look for is Smash Hits or Boys Own magazine.
Sure.
True thing. I can't believe, you look back now when you're like, Boys Own had like a monthly magazine. That's crazy. That was available in like the newsagents.
Yeah, I always go back to the old joke about Carp of the Month. That whole idea of like, what they must be struggling after like 2 months. Like, have we got a carp that's done something?
But then again, like if you think about like even now, like even boy bands now, like you look at One Direction released an album every year. Like pop groups really got worked in the 90s. So if you think about it, if they had an album every year, 4 singles an album, do you know what I mean? There's the content there. No. Boys, by the way, for US listeners, Boys Own were a boy band in the United Kingdom. I remember magazines more, and like I said, occasionally I think Power Rangers magazine had a comic in, but I didn't really engage with comics regularly, except I realised when reading this that what they remind me of is something that I did have an awful lot of. And whilst I didn't get it weekly, do you remember they would release like not necessarily annuals because they came out more regularly than that, but basically books of Simpsons comics.
Oh, yes.
So it would be like, you would get like a book, but it would be issues of the comics. So I can't really remember whether they were themed or whether it was, like there's a term for it, isn't it? Where like The Walking Dead, where you collect issues 1 to 15,
trade paperback. Yeah, so
I don't know whether they were trade paperbacks or whether they were like themed issues, like the VHSs were. But I had loads of those Simpsons comic collections, and reading this, and I wouldn't have even thought of that. But reading this, I was like, oh, this reminds me of, like, The Simpsons. Like, it genuinely kind of, like, if you're not into comics, you read it and go, it's not as good as watching an episode, but these are the characters that I like, and these are fun. Like, and I was like, I felt like this before. And it reminded me of that, and I was like, oh, I guess I did engage with with comics, because I had loads of those.
Yeah, I had a lot of those as well. I also, I did have some of the individual issues of the Simpsons comics, but it was way easier just to wait and get the trade where it collected 8 issues or whatever. It was a cheaper way to do it, basically. I think they called their versions of the trade Simpsorama, so it was like 8 issues crammed into one sort of book. So I think it came with it was like a hardback or a paperback, but I think I had a hardback one, a couple of those. They were good fun. They were really good fun. Those Simpsons comics, I had those too.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, they were. They're like, if you Google Simpsons Rama book, like the first option is them flying on copies of the comic, which I think I had. Like, I recognised that cover.
Right. There you go. Yeah, they were quite popular.
Unless that was just one issue was called that, maybe, because that's the only thing that's coming up.
Oh, maybe. I thought the Simpsons Ramble was what they called the trade paperbacks, but I could be wrong. But yeah, I definitely had that issue, that book. So yeah, it was. So that's interesting. So yes, I grew up I remember going to the newsagents and seeing, having watched the 90s, the early 90s Spider-Man cartoon, going into at the age of 8 or 9, going into a newsagents and seeing Spider-Man comics and being very excited by that. It's interesting, all the spin-off media comics I have a very different relationship with, because the ultimate comic to spin off from a thing that's really worth your time, to the point where where I would recommend people check it out, weirdly, is Avatar: The Last Airbender, because there's a plot point from the show that they didn't get time to resolve that they tackle in the comics, and it's really worth reading. It adds to the world, and it's written by the guys who wrote the show. But then you get these comics that fall into this region, which is what we're talking about today, which is when the show is still running. The creator was kind of going to sign off on it. My understanding is, for those wondering, we're reading that today. We're going to be talking about that first run of 8 comics that was sort of Rebecca Sugar had an oversight on. I don't know how much involvement she actually had in the writing of these comics, but she definitely gave them sort of the seal of approval. Which is unlike what came after that. The run that started in 2017 have been completely outside of her purview, is my understanding. So we're sticking with the 8 that Rebecca Sugar had some level of being able to say, you can't do that, you can do that. You know what I mean? That kind of makes it feel more canon to me. Although this is all considered second tier canon, which apparently just basically means it's canon unless the show contradicts it.
Yeah,
which nothing in this was contradicted by the show.
Can I just say, looking at it, sorry to take us back, but so that was one issue, but they always played on it. So it was Simpsons Comics Spectacular, which I had as well, Simpsons Comic Extravaganza, Simpsons Comics Simpson Rama, which I also had. The one I really remember, Simpsons Comics Big Bonanza, which is like them as cowboys on the front. Simpsons Comics The Best of Bartman. Yeah, I had Big Bonanza. Simpsons Comics Wingding, which was them in a plane, which I also had.
Interesting. So, what's funny about that, though, it's worth noting, is you weren't really that big of a Simpsons fan, to my knowledge, as the show. You watched it, but I
was. No, I watched The Simpsons a lot. It's really weird. Okay. I think it's one that's not really. I don't know whether it's one of the few shows that didn't. I wouldn't say I was as emotively connected to it as Power Rangers or something like Boy Meets World, but I did, and it's because it's come up before. And it's when I've said, when we talked about animation and I've gone, well, I love The Simpsons, I've almost felt you kind of in your head going, well, everyone loved The Simpsons, that doesn't count. But no, I had books, I had merchandise.
It counts. It's just, it is kind of like the, it's what UB40 is to reggae.
I think the problem... I think the problem we are making a lot of UK specific references this episode. I think the problem with The Simpsons is if you're a big fan of The Simpsons, people interpret that to mean you have the DVDs, you can name the episodes, and you've watched every single episode. Because there's so much of The Simpsons, I was a big fan of The Simpsons. I just can't tell you the name of every episode. But there's almost with The Simpsons, there should be this middle ground of, no, you can be a big fan and not still be watching. I had books about I had the episode guide book. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I think I had that too. Yeah,
a complete guide or something. Loved that book
because that's where I discovered the what the first episode actually was. Because the first episode Channel 4 in the UK aired when they had their
Simpsons
big
roasting
"We've
on an
got the
open fire
Simpsons."
is the first episode.
It
Boom,
is exactly
see?
that. It
I'm a fan.
absolutely is that. But that's not what Channel 4 aired first when they finally got the rights. So when The Simpsons finally came to the UK, it was probably, I don't know exactly when, but it was nowhere near Christmas. So they didn't want to air Simpsons Roasting on an Open Fire, which is the one where they get Santa's Little Helper, which was the first produced episode of the series. After the Tracy Ullman stuff, obviously. And they aired the one, oh god, the name of it's escaped me. It's the one where the Simpsons go to family therapy with Marvin Monroe and he has them electrocuting each other. That was the first episode that aired on Channel 4. So it's the very first episode of The Simpsons I ever saw. Yeah, but I had that same book. I had that same guide.
I will say, like, that guide, like, that was probably, like, for you and I, like, our favourite book. But it's such, like, a TV nerd book. Like, it's literally an episode guide.
Yes.
Like, it's so... it's so up our street.
I was glad I
but
got
I'm
hold of
like,
that.
who else is that for? And looking at it, so I had The Simpsons, A Complete Guide to Our Favourite Family, The Simpsons Forever, which was the sequel, and then I think I might have had The Simpsons Beyond Forever as well, which was then the next one. But it looks like there was The Simpsons One Step Beyond Forever, which covered seasons 13 and 14, which I don't think I had.
That's great.
Anyway,
so yeah,
it's interesting, isn't it? Because
go on, sorry.
there are two. I think there are two types of comic connected to TV. There's subsidiary stuff like this, like you say, that is kind of side stories in the world, and then there's Avatar, Firefly, Buffy, where they do sequels or fill in specific story gaps. And I went into it for some reason. I went into this thinking it was the second, which doesn't make any fucking sense because obviously I know they've been out ages and Future's only just finished. But I think that's why I was kind of like, Dan and I were discussing before we came on here. We talked about 8 books. Do we need to do 2 episodes? And we both read them and went no. There's not enough to say.
Well, it's what I said to Chris is we could absolutely we could, to clarify, we could absolutely waste everyone's time doing 2 episodes until we break them down, do 4 and 4 or something like that. But the problem is I don't know if we'd add anything to what the viewer would get out of sitting and reading these. And I'll say this up top. They're good. They're really entertaining. They're charming little stories. They're beautifully drawn. If you're interested in Steven Universe, and particularly Steven Universe from that really early era, the pre the world expanding, pre-jailbreak almost, world of Steven Universe where it's just Steven on little fun adventures around town, then genuinely read these. You'll get a lot out of them. There's 8 of them. It'll take you what? But I reckoned it took me about 4 to 5 minutes to read each full issue. So 40 minutes at most of your life, I'd say. And even if you want to really take your time, it's not going to take you more than an hour. And you won't regret it. They're really, really well done. They've got the tone just right. The visuals are good. All that stuff. We'll break them down in a little bit more than that in a minute. But we didn't want to do the issue reviews the way we normally review episodes because I didn't think we could add anything that you wouldn't get from just reading it because they're pretty straightforward. I don't feel like we could add any character analysis or depth to what exists. So if you haven't read those comics, this is going to act more as an overall sort of more spoiler-free sort of like impressions of them, if possible, than it is going to be an outright breakdown review. So sorry to the people who are looking more for that when they asked us to take a look at these. But I just don't know what we could add to the discussion on those. But
also, I wouldn't want to discourage anyone from, you should read them. So I wouldn't want to do a deep dive and make people go, oh, well, I know what happens.
Yes.
I know everything. Never mind. You should absolutely read them.
Yeah, because it's weird. Because normally we do at this show, it's like the assumption is you've already seen the show. You're listening to a podcast about it. But the comics are such sort of supplementary material. There's a really good chance that as big a fan as I am of the show, I'd never read these. I knew they existed. I'd never read them. I've looked further down at the list of books as well for the series that started in 2017, the one that Rebecca Sugar wasn't involved in, and it looks like they've got 4 or 5 issues in a row specifically telling stories about Lars and the Off-Colors off in space doing space adventures. That makes me very excited. I might even at some point check those out. But in terms of these ones, like they're really nice, fun stories. But it's interesting what the line they have to tote though, because they do feel very restrained, and it's not their fault. They have to be, because this is the issue you have when you're doing supplemental material like this, especially because these came out while the show was still airing. You don't want to contradict anything in the show because you don't want your comic to become obsolete immediately. You don't want your comic to be released and then a story element happen that makes something you've put in your book not match, therefore it becomes non-canon straight away. That is so you've got a really fine line to walk when you're writing something like this. So these all have to be kind of simple, isolated stories that echo character stuff we get from the show. We're not learning anything new about the characters in these. We end up reinforcing things we already knew about them. Does that make sense? And that's different to what some of the, like that Buffy comic Chris referenced earlier is season 8. It's season 7, whatever it is, 8. Whichever season came after the one where it ended. It does continue the show. Literally, that's its goal. And it's kind of incredible. And Joss was very heavily involved. He wrote issues of it, all that stuff. And it really did continue the story. This is very much the other side of that coin, which is just like really inoffensive, light, very carefully crafted so it doesn't interfere with the existence of the show. So you have to go into them sort of with that in mind, I think.
Yeah, I think so. And I think also, because you don't go into it with, like, in terms of, like, there are some stories here that could almost be prequels. Like, I'm sure they're not, but there's certain references to things that makes you go, oh, this is set early. Like, and I think it would be reasonable for some people to go into this hoping for, well, like you referenced, clearly that's not the case with later ones if we have Lars in space and stuff, but certainly with these 8 issues that we've looked at, like there's an episode where Steven's struggling to produce, there's an issue where Steven's struggling to produce his shield, isn't there? So it's like, it's early stuff, which is a lot of fun, but in a world, where we've watched the entire show, I think someone would be forgiven for going to these wanting those kind of later stories.
No, yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think I mean, you even asked me where they were set, I think, before we did this, and I wasn't sure, and I was trying to go from memory, and I guess I had some of those covers in my head, from the later issues, with Steven and where there's Peridot and Lapis stuff. I was like, I think it's post Lapis at least, but it's not. It's really set before the world opened up, and that's probably actually just because that's when it was made. Looking at the date, 2014, these were written. I don't think the show had gotten to that point yet, if that makes sense. Anyway, so that it couldn't include that stuff at the time. These would have felt very current, I imagine. And I also imagine those later ones that without sort of Rebecca Sugar sort of overseeing them probably felt more confident to tell their own stories in the world, making and taking more risks, more willing to sort of potentially step on canon because the results might be more interesting. And that's not to say these issues aren't of value, but I do think there's an element of that to the later comics that kind of almost drawing me towards those later ones.
So to do a slightly deeper dive then, a deeper review, what would you say is the best thing, and what would you say is probably the word weakest seems too harsh, but the thing that jarred most with you about this? So what did you enjoy the most, and what did you enjoy the least personally?
I think that the stories were the thing that stood out. They were very clever because they all told us something about a character or the characters, even when they seemed frivolous on the surface, which feels very true to Steven Universe. And it was usually something we already knew as viewers of the show, but that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that inherently. And I think that they pitched each story quite carefully, it felt, for that. so particularly, like, for example, the lion issue is a good example. I think it's a really nice issue where Stephen learns a pretty clear lesson. So basically, for those who haven't read these, is a little plot summary on one of them. There's one called Taxi, where Stephen discovers that he could potentially pimp Lion out as a taxi. So he puts a little hat on Lion that says Taxi, and then he's got a little stand made of cardboard with him and Connie running in. People will come, and Lion will take them places. But then Lion gets fed up instead of being bossed around, and Stephen never considered if that's what Lion wanted or not. And Stephen learns a real lesson there about how to treat his friends, essentially, and not to think of Lion as a horse or a pet. It's Lion is a being of his own, with his own mind and thoughts and feelings, and then it that felt very true to the show. Like, I read that one, I remember thinking that could have been an episode of the show easily. If that episode had shown up in season 1, you'd have gone, yeah, that's about right. And that's what's most impressive, is that they found these stories that really do fit to that season 1 aesthetic of Steven Universe.
What's interesting about that story for me is that story most highlighted the thing that I found most challenging about them, in that sometimes the stories were so big that the comic, like that comic, ends at a point where I want to see the next 5 pages of what happens after. And if it was an episode, it never would have ended at the point that it ends.
No, it would have had more time.
It would have gone on for another 3 minutes. And I think sometimes the ideas for the stories are so good and so big that you don't have, they couldn't give themselves time to explore it explore it properly. And that's my biggest example of that. That one ended and I was like, oh, I would have really liked to have
turned
seen
the page,
a bit more
like,
of that.
Where's more? Yeah, I 100% agree. It's they sometimes come up with stories that are the size of an episode and would be an episode, 10 minutes, and that's great. A thumbs up, as I've just got, but equally, Chris is absolutely spot on. One of the most jarring elements is for sure that they don't have the pages to actually explore the story. They don't have the time that the show has. Like I said, you read one of these in 4 minutes. Like it's the show would definitely have more time to round the stories off than they get here. So that one particularly is a really good example of just one of the ones that just ends extremely abruptly.
Some are 2-parters. There's a 2-parter, but even that 2-parter is crammed full of stuff where you're like, oh god, like this, and also it could have been, you could have done some really nice. I think that's a good example. The 2-parter is a good example, and I'm just being careful for those that have read them. It's the one that involves Pearl sneezing, and that 2-parter. I suppose that's a good example of what you were talking about earlier with that freedom to play, like, because you could have crammed that with some Easter eggs if you wanted to, and they don't necessarily take advantage of that opportunity. So yeah, even that 2-parter where they've got more pages, it feels again like it was a much bigger idea. They could have done more with. That's not to say that what they do isn't brilliant. Like that lion thing that we're talking about, all those pages are fantastic. As you said, there's a lot of character stuff. It's a really great issue. But in terms of what I jarred against, part of me was aching to see more of that. On the flip side, though, the thing I loved most was actually not the main. So the books, they tend to have 3 kind of things in them. One's a very kind of fun, light thing. One's a kind of a shorter story. And one's that longer story. And we should say there's all sorts of kind of drawings and art style within them. And there's some pages are just an image, and they're fucking brilliant. Like there's some really cool visuals in these. It's even if you don't like comics, it's worth just looking through them for the art and stuff, because there's some great stuff in there. And there's sometimes the little stories where the story, because, you've only got like 3 or 4 pages, the story isn't big enough to jar. So it's kind of like these, I'd have been happy with 8 issues that each had 6 bite-sized stories in. Right. My favourite piece of content across all 8 episodes, I really won't spoil it, across all 8 issues is a story called Disco.
Yes.
Disco, I don't know if you remember that one.
Yes,
but
I
Disco
do.
for me
Disco
is the
yeah.
perfect plot. It is the perfect partnership of plot and space that I saw in those books. It was funny. It was light. It was just a riot. And I think, I appreciate what, obviously, this is incredibly personal, and it might be my lack of, I'm not necessarily a comic book reader. That probably plays a big part in it. For me personally, like, loads of those little stories, like Yes Please, I loved Disco so much. I really reckon, I can't remember which issue it's in.
It's in 3. It's in issue 3. I've got I purposefully opened up the wiki page with the episode, with the issues and the title. So yeah, Disco, I can confirm, is in the 3rd issue.
It's so good, and it's just like I say though, that is a great example of it is the perfect sized story for the space it's got to tell that story.
Yes,
it's
3. Disco is 3 pages. It is very, very good. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because you've got to fill a whole comic, and you sort of go like, well, okay, so we'll have our main story. We'll make that the bulk of the pages, and then at the back we'll sort of we'll have either some one-shot stuff, or we'll have in one of them they do an Uncle Grandpa thing, which I didn't. I'll be honest, I didn't read. And I'm sure Chris.
Oh, I never read that. No,
no, I'm sure Chris didn't either. But then they tell either there'll be a 1-page story and a 2 or 3-page story as well, just a couple of little shorts right at the back. And they are really. They are usually quite fun. They definitely, because it feels like they're more aware of their length. And it feels like all the biggest ideas get crammed into those longer stories because they are the longer stories you get to tell. But it almost feels like they don't have enough time. It's like the 3-page stories or the 1-page stories. They went, we've only got a page. We got to really keep this short and sweet, and we've got to make sure we design a story that fits that. And then it felt like that they kind of were looking at the longer stories which is the bulk of it, as their episodes in quote marks, and then they had all their bigger ideas in there. But those ideas, as Chris has pointed out, were definitely bigger than the length of a single issue would allow. You'd almost sort of think they should have maybe turned all of them into two parts, and done each story across 2 issues.
Because that Pearl one is a highlight.
Yeah, the Pearl one where Pearl gets sick, that one is a highlight because you get some more time to explore it properly, and that's a good fun one. Another one that I really do stands out for me is I think it's the 2nd issue. It's when he's trying to. Oh no, not the 2nd one. That's the bike one. Which is the one? 1 second. I think maybe it's the 3rd one again then, the one with Disco's in. The one where Greg and Steven are going for a picnic, but Steven keeps getting drawn into gem stuff, so he's not getting to spend as much time with his dad.
Oh yeah.
I think
again they did.
That's episode.
Yeah,
that's the 3rd one again. So that's the same one as Disco. So far, what we're telling you is definitely read issue 3. That one's really good though. That one I really liked, and I love that one made me feel kind of sad for Greg because you don't often see it from his perspective in the show, because the show has this rule of you're following Steven. They actually break that rule in that issue, and it's following Greg, and Steven's running off, and it's you feel for him, to be honest with you.
Yeah, but even that's got elements like that would it be expanded more in an episode. But I don't feel, even though I'm saying it's not really a fair criticism, because obviously we'd all like episodes. Do you know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah, it's true. Yeah, the only one it really negatively affects in a way that I noticed is the lion story, because that is very abrupt. That is the best. That is the clearest example of being a genuine problem and not just a nitpick. Does that make sense? And I'm not trying to dismissing your.
I'm probably nitpicking with the band one. Although it wasn't in. I think the thing with the band one, with the Greg one, sorry, is that it's not. That almost has an A story and a B story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does.
And it's a bit. They don't merge as cleanly as they should.
No, that's true.
It's a bit like, oh, this is happening. okay, like
Yeah, I you do almost wish they'd separate the two stories so you could get focus on them. But again, that is another another sign of limitations of what they've done. So essentially, I think what we're saying is that like the writers maybe should have chosen. It was almost like they were excited to play in the world of Steven Universe, and they chose ideas that were bigger than the pages could contain, and that is unfortunate because if you did that with a TV show, if you were writing a TV show, if you were writing Steven Universe and you were fitting in 20-minute ideas into 10-minute episodes, it would feel the same way. It's jarring. It is a writing problem at the end of the day. So I guess it is. It is a fair criticism. When if you think of a story that's too big for the canvas you've been given, then you've got a problem. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but we come back to it's not an issue. It's an issue. Like to describe it as a writing problem is almost too grand. It's not an issue unless you're analysing them for 45 minutes on a podcast. If you're just picking them up as a fan of Steven Universe for something fun to read, then it's great. Can I take us on a quick side note, Dan?
Sure.
Just to let you know, because I know you'll be thinking about it. I've just done some digging as you were talking then. And so Swatch Out is the headline on One Boyzone magazine. That was about their time in Malaysia. Then Pop, which is behind the scenes of their advert for Pepsi. Then we've got New York, New York. Then we've got a Shane special. I just wanted to get like an idea of what it was about. There's a Shane special. There's an edition entirely dedicated to posters. And probably the best cover story headline ever. Checkmates, behind the scenes with Boyzone at their video shot in Prague. Obviously, Czech is spelled C-Z-E-C-H. I mean, and Lone Star, the beginning at the end, Lone Star, Ronan makes a solo #1. That was the beginning of the end of Boyzone, as we all know, Dan. Well, until they reunited, obviously. I just wanted to let you know what some of the issues were about.
I mean, what do
you thought they wouldn't have content? Pop, behind the scenes of a Pepsi advert, and Checkmates, I think proves you wrong, Dan.
I mean, is that a whole thing though? Like what? I mean, okay. So if that is the main issue of their equivalent to a comic, Chris, their equivalent to the magazine. You know, if the bulk of it is a big article about their Pepsi, what's filling the rest of the pages? Oh, a pull-out poster of one of their heads.
I mean, it would be that.
Yeah, it would. Yeah,
it absolutely would be
a quick 40-second interview with one of the members about their favourite kinds of milk. To be fair, I can't talk. I did used to get Smash Hits, which is for those. I don't know if they had that in the States. I suspect they didn't. Which is like a magazine about pop music and stuff. And when you're 10 or 11, like that's like pop music is the only music you're aware of.
Do you remember TV hits?
I remember hearing Offspring's Americana and never buying another issue of Smash Hits. That is genuinely what happened. That was my first introduction. It was so clean. I was introduced to guitar-based music, rock music, and gone. I was gone. I never looked back.
I stuck with it. I stuck with it for quite a while, I think.
Yeah, you did.
Do you remember TV Hits? It was like a shitter version of Smash Hits that was called TV Hits, but was actually still about music.
No, that's amazing.
Yeah,
that was great.
I really remember one issue of Smash Hits came in like a cereal box, and it was called like the Big Giveaway issue, and there was just all sorts of shit in it, like packs of crisps and a chocolate bar. Amazing. It was really weird. Let's see if I can find a picture of it. But anyway, I would recommend this, not Smash Hits. I'd recommend Boyzone magazine for any fan. But I'd absolutely recommend this.
Yeah, I think what's great about these is there's clearly a handful of different writers working on it, and these smaller stories at the back really give. So the main stories are all in the same art style. It's worth noting they're they're the through line. They're your main thing, and all the sort of smaller side stories at the back take different art styles as they go. Some look hand drawn. It with like in pencil, some have like looser, like softer edges. Some look done on a computer, so they've got those tracking marks. Some are done like a pop art style, so they've got like the dots, and they're all in different sort of art styles, and that's a really nice way to explore the world of Steven Universe without and get different tones mixed in with the existing show's tone, because the art style of the main stories is designed to match the show reasonably well, and does. They're really like those clean lines that you expect. It does a really good job. I don't have the name of the artist on hand, but the artist who drew those, I think it was one artist that did, I think, all the issues. Coleman Engel? I think it's Coleman Engel, Chris. But I'm going to find out because now I feel stupid. Oh dear. Where are the credits? Oh yeah, Coleman Engel seems to have done. I've been through 3 of them now, and I found the name Coleman Engel as so Coleman Engel is the illustrator for the main story in each one, but then someone different draws all the extra stories, and that's a really nice way to sort of get different sort of visions and voices in. Particularly, there's one that's incredible. It's called Lion's Share, and it's done by someone called Grace Craft, and it's the art style in that one is just superb. It's so organic. It really does pop off the page. It's quite remarkable, actually, because you almost kind of wish the whole book was drawn that way. And obviously no offense intended to Coleman Engel, who has clearly done a very good job capturing the show style for the main stories. I think the panels are usually
it's really impressive.
The panels themselves are usually designed in quite a straightforward way. Unfortunately, I do like a comic that sort of goes off the beaten path in terms of experimenting with actually the panel progression, but in this book, that it's very much, here's a box, now you read the next box, now read the next box. I like it when they have like, I mean, this is just something coming from someone who read a lot of comics as a kid, I guess. I like it when they experiment a bit more with the panel design and images, sort of things going over the panels and using that. So there's one really interesting use of it in which one? The 8th issue. There's a clock tower, and there's a moment that's showing it go through a bunch of times at once. So the panel splits into like 6, and it shows it at different stages in its sort of life cycle. And that was pretty cool. And I remember thinking, like, God, it's the last issue and you're doing that. I wish you'd experimented more with the actual structure of your images and maybe done some more splash pages. Because that's one thing I associate with comics as well. The iconic splash page, which is when, you turn that page in a comic and both pages on the next page are dedicated to one image. And it's so big. Instead of being in a little box inside of your little comic, it just suddenly spills out. Those are my favorite things. There's a splash page in Civil War, the Marvel Comics Civil War, which is so iconic, and it's just chaos in the image. And I never wanted more to just not turn the page and just look at every detail. It was so cool. I remember there was a big splash page in, I think, Ultimate X-Men as well, and it was Logan after he'd been blasted. And it was like his wounds healing, and it was gory, but it was really cool. And it was upside down, so because it was like he'd been flipped upside down, and you could if you turned it, there was a tiny text box in the bottom left corner that said "Knew you'd turn it round," or turn it upside down or something like that from the editor, which is really neat. Like stuff like that makes comics is what makes one of the things that separates comics from television, and stuff. Why not take advantage of your medium? Do you know what I mean? These are
that's very true. Actually, that's a very fair criticism, I think.
Yeah, they're drawn beautifully, but they're also graphically structured in a very, very generic way, and it's a shame because I just feel like you could have taken more advantage of the format. I think, especially in the world of Steven Universe, where the visuals are kind of weird anyway for most cartoons. Like Steven Universe has got a really distinct look to it as a TV show, so I feel like did I have even an iota of this person's artistic talent, and obviously I do not, but I would have maybe wanted to experiment more with that structure. So I guess if we're going to do criticisms, that's my big one. But
did you find you had to, because I felt I had to work quite hard sometimes to work out who was saying what in what order.
Yeah.
Now, is that just me not being a comic book guy and not being certainly a modern comic book guy, or was that a little bit trickier than it than it. Is that just with the times, and that's just me, or is that fair to the
no?
books
I think
themselves?
that's a very interesting observation. I had a similar issue once or twice, and what I think it's when multiple people it's when they try to cram too many people saying too much into one box, and they don't use the. There's one or two examples where they don't use the clean lines to illustrate where it's coming from. They're overlapping in the way that you can't see the line from the box down to the human saying the word or the gem saying the words. There aren't many examples of it. It was mostly fine, but I think there were at least 2 panels in this where you physically couldn't see the line that indicates who's speaking. I remember distinctly there was one exchange between, I think it was Garnet and Pearl in one of the earliest issues that I had to look at 2 or 3 times to figure out who was saying what. And in the end, I got it from context, not from, because when I actually looked directly, like, I studied it a bit more, the boxes filled up so much of the image that one overlapped over the line that was leading to the mouth of the head of the character speaking. I definitely, you are not completely out there. There are a couple where that it's a little unclear, but I mean, I don't know how often that happens in just any comic. I guess that's a danger whenever you're sort of cramming too much into a box. But yeah, there were definitely a couple of examples of that for sure.
Okay.
But I think they're funny. They're charming. The characters are written really on point. Like nothing. It did feel like they took a lot of care to make sure that, like, it should be worth complimenting them on, like, the voice of each character. They got that.
Yeah,
they nailed it, right? Like, so Steven talks like Steven really well. It feels like they really understood how these characters should speak and be. And one of my favorite stories in all of this was a Pearl one. I think it was one of the side stories. It's the Pearl one where she's being told the. Oh no, it's the main story of issue 7. It's called Story Time. And it's an issue where Connie's telling Pearl a story about a character called Merle, and Pearl Pearl imagines Merle as herself.
Such a bizarre story.
Well, such a bizarre story, but it has but Pearl's responses in it are like incredible. Like, it's so well written.
Yeah.
They got it right. So there's a bit where Connie's trying to explain to Pearl about this magical world that exists in a book she's read. And she's saying about like there's a shadowy curtain that merges the worlds, and it's like, some fantasy element, right? And Pearl's genuine response is impossible. It's a curtain. Who wrote this book? I shall call them immediately to explain curtains. And that is genuinely the most Pearl thing Pearl could have said in that moment. And the great thing about that story, the reason I love it so much, is the irony, of course, of Pearl lives in a magical world of gems and powers and stuff, and yet she can't accept the fantasy elements of this book Connie's just describing to her. It's really charming, but it's a really good example of how well they nailed the characters, because Pearl's response is so perfect. It's so on point. So it's credit to the writers as well here, because I think as well as the artists recreate the style of the show, the writers really got the voice of the show, like, spot on. Several of these stories and elements could have easily been episodes or elements of episodes of the show without question. They truly understood it, and that is to be commended. Nitpicks aside about they could have been more experimental with the boxes, or some of these stories were they were bigger than they really could fit into their issue size. These are very charming and absolutely worth digging out if you haven't read them. I think if you're a big fan and you're feeling that itch, you're missing some Steven Universe, particularly if you're missing classic early Steven Universe, sort of pre-Lapis, basically. These are great. These are a really fun way to explore that tone and that world, for sure.
Yeah, I think they're a lot of fun. I think some of the side stories in particular are real highlights for me.
Yes.
And also we've not talked about it that much. I can't stress enough, and the reason we've not talked about it is because just check out some issues and check it out. it's so beautifully drawn.
Yeah,
like there's some of the page visuals. Like I completely agree with your thought of they don't use the medium for things like splash visuals and stuff. There are, however, some separate. They're not splash visuals because they're not part of the story, but there's just some random like pieces of art littered throughout, which are beautiful. So I like Dan would absolutely recommend people check this out. And I also just as a separate side note again, I've just done a quick Google image search, Dan, to check. And Smash Hits did about 9 covers at least, as far as I can see, that had Hanson on it. So I don't think it's fair to say that they were completely ignoring guitar music, because clearly represented by Hanson.
Yes,
that's all. Just wanted to add.
Did they have Offspring?
No, I did. The trouble, I did search Smash Hits, The Offspring, but obviously Offspring released a greatest hits album called The Hits, and obviously one of their biggest albums is called Smash, so the results were very much...
I forgot about that, you're right. That wouldn't be, that search is basically useless.
Yeah, it was. The results were very much tailored by their greatest hits, which was just called Greatest Hits, actually. But of course,
what are the odds of that? That is so unfortunate. What are the odds of that?
I know. So I don't know whether Smash Hits ever covered them.
I've just done a similar search, but I added the word magazine just to see if I could sort of like narrow it down. And I have found that I think the US equivalent to Smash Hits was a magazine called Melody Maker.
I thought Melody Maker was a UK magazine.
Oh, okay. I'm reading the wrong thing then. Because there's an image here.
Melody Maker was
that
a
has
British...
Offspring on the cover. But it's not Smash
right.
Hits.
Melody Maker, according to Wikipedia, was a UK magazine.
Then there you go. Ignore me. And that probably was based specifically because looking at it closer, now I've blown it up. The sub stuff is about Placebo and Ash and Supergrass. So clearly that is a magazine aimed at that.
Yeah.
So they didn't. It doesn't look like they quite got onto the cover of Smash Hits, Chris, which is not surprising, knowing the tone of Smash Hits. I mean, I'm pretty sure Britney Spears appeared on most covers of Smash Hits.
Yeah, I reckon so.
Either her or like various members of boy bands. I'm sure there was a H from Steps issue.
Oh, there was lots of boy bands, yeah. But I think it was weekly, so they had to. Yeah, I'm just.
Was that
there's
magazine
no way
weekly?
you can find a list.
That magazine was weekly.
I'm pretty sure because it wasn't that. It wasn't like a Stickers Q or anything, was it? Hold on.
It was quite thin. I remember it being quite thin. To be fair.
Does it say frequency? Initially monthly, then fortnightly.
Fortnightly. Okay, yeah, that sort of fits. Wow. Yeah, that's its own.
I did try and see. Like, I was like, well, what are some of the like other heavier bands? But so I tried Smash Hits, Nickelback, but couldn't find anything. I thought they might fit. Like,
God. Yeah, but yeah, that sort of like it's the UB40 problem we talked about earlier, Chris. When it's sort of like it's not really reggae music; it's pop reggae, which means that like it might be a gateway for someone to discover. The same way that Jamie Cullum isn't really jazz music, but some people have found jazz through Jamie Cullum.
Yeah. Which is why I think nowadays Busted are getting more credit because they were a gateway band for a lot of people.
Who? Sorry,
but
I missed the
Busted.
Name. Oh, Busted. Yeah,
Busted.
yeah. I guess so. Yeah, I guess that's probably true.
Did you see the other day? Like it was a few weeks ago. Nickelback announced like a new single, and literally Twitter was just full of people being like, "Come on, 2020!
Yeah, have we not suffered enough?
Not had enough?
We've suffered enough. We have suffered enough."
Those poor bastards. They do what they do. Like I'm not a fan, but they do what they do well. Like
Yeah, but what they do is shit. It's not good to do shit well, I don't think.
But my big, because I'll tell you what, like Silver Side Up, I had that album as a
teenager. Did too. Who didn't? Who didn't at that age? Yeah, we were the age that are responsible. We are the youth that are responsible for Nickelback because there's that first album they tricked us. We all bought that album because the single was good.
Well, that for any just to be a pedantic arsehole for any Nickelback fans that are listening, I think Silver Side's Up like their third album, but it was their first big album. Yes.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So it was the one they tricked us with that got them like huge and famous. And I'm
Huge,
sure
yeah.
with every band, when you say first, you mean the first big album. Obviously, a lot of bands had like small albums. No one talks about. They don't make basketball shorts the way they used to. The first Hoobastank album. No one talks about that. No, they all talk about the second album or The Reason.
I think you're the only person that's still talking about Hoobastank. But anyway,
I love the self-titled album. The self-titled Hoobastank album before the one that The Reason was on is one of my favorite albums of all time. Love that album. Anyway, yeah. So like you want to. This podcast has gone off the rails, hasn't it? We've lost control.
That's fine. We're going. Finish your. So Nickelback.
Yeah. So everyone. They released an album with a single that people liked. They like How You Remind Me is a reasonably good song. Then they had the one from the Spider-Man soundtrack, which we all heard repeatedly and got. So we bought the album.
They say that a hero can save
en masse.
We
all didn't know any better, and then we all sort of. Like, time passed and we gained taste and we learned our lesson, and then it was too late. They were already too big, and a lot of idiots still like their music. Like, I remember people who knew I was into rock music, guitar music, anything like that, coming to talk to me about Rockstar when that came out, and I'm like, no.
Well, to be honest with you, that's where they lost me, because I didn't mind. I liked Silver Side Up. I quite liked The Long Road, and when it first came out, All the Right Reasons I quite enjoyed. And then I think the problem is Rockstar and Photograph got overplayed, but then where they kind of lost me is every album after that felt like it was built to the same formula of All the Right Reasons. It just felt like they were repeating themselves. And they do things.
I never even got to another album after Silver Side Up for the same reason. It was just like, no, I get it. Thanks, guys. We're done.
Yeah, and it just felt very repetitive. And they would do things like tour. I get it when you're as big as like, I don't know, U2, but I don't. They did that thing which kind of grates on me when bands do it a little bit, which is release an album and then tour and play like 2 songs from that album. And I'm like, either Rolling Stones it and just keep touring and only periodically release new stuff because it's the back catalogue, but don't release stuff and then not have enough faith in it to then play it. Like, say what you want about Coldplay. They can commit every time they release an album. Every album is different. I'm not necessarily a big Coldplay fan, but every album is different, and every kind of tour for that album commits to that album and stuff like that. And I just think that's commendable. And we've gone on quite a bizarre.
Yeah, so that's Steven Universe Comics. I hope you got a lot out of that Steven Universe comic discussion.
Yeah, but there's not much more to say other than read them.
Yeah, I think they're worth it, and at some point we may come back to look at some of those like those lesser, as far as I'm concerned, like canon wise, the ones without any involvement of Rebecca Sugar. We could come back to those at a certain point, I feel, and maybe have a look at whether like take a couple of issues of those. Maybe that I am very intrigued by the idea of seeing some Lars and the Off Color stories. And maybe coming back and reporting back on whether those are worth anything. But if people have read those, I wouldn't mind some comments down below on people's opinions on those issues as well. That 2017 onward run, which is still going, actually. They're still releasing new issues of that comic that started in 2017. So that's obviously doing quite well for them to be still pushing out issues, even beyond the show. So yeah, absolutely. If anyone has any thoughts on that or wants us to cover that, let us know. Although I wouldn't be surprised if it was like, I would like someone to cover those, but probably not you two, since you both seem deeply unqualified to review comics.
It's fair. It's fair criticism.
Yeah, anyone who feels this way after this episode, I would not blame you. But
I would like to know people's thoughts on Nickelback. So feel free to also leave them below.
Yeah, sure. And what album changed your, like I said, Offspring, Americana changed my entire musical taste and musical direction for the and when you're younger, music kind of defines you as a person. So Offspring's Americana has a lot to answer for. For the clothes I wore, for the entire attitude I took, for the friends I kept for like the next 5-10 years.
For me, that was the first one was The Cooling. Was the first like guitar rock band. But then I never. I've collected new music genres and taste, but never let go of the other ones either. Like, do you know what I mean? Even when I switched to very kind of guitar based and alternative, I never lost the love for pop and for Boyzone. And I think that comes from an absurd and unjustified lack of shame when it comes to music. Do you know what I mean? I think a lot of people probably let go of some of that early stuff because they didn't want to admit it. Whereas I've sort of worn the Hanson and the Boyzone badge with quite a bit of pride.
That's interesting because for me, it was more like, it wasn't a pride thing. It wasn't a shame thing. It was like all I'd ever eaten was a McDonald's burger. And then someone gave me a really good, proper true burger with like 100% beef, no added, and I was like, oh no, this is
still talking about Americana by Offspring, yeah.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. So like, pop music represents McDonald's, and like it fills a void. It sells albums. It's popular. Of course, it's popular. It's McDonald's. But then I had like something that was far superior to that and showed me the ceiling was higher than I was aware. But you know what I mean, like. It's not that I thought less of pop music. It's more that I realized music could be more. Does that make sense? So that it de-elevates pop music, but doesn't actually make it any worse necessarily. It just showed me the ceiling was beyond that, and like listening to the music that I'm being shoveled by the industry, rather that's manufactured by an industry, rather than actual artists writing really good songs.
But I think you can cut it. You can. I see what you're saying, but I think in defense of some pop, it also has a flip side of like, I guarantee you like out of the two genres, I would probably pick guitar music, but I've been to pop gigs as an adult and I've been to guitar music gigs as an adult, and let me tell you now, the place where people are really letting go of their inhibitions and having just the best time is the pop gigs. I think pop can. I see what you're saying about the manufactured stuff, but I think some pop, even some manufactured pop, can lead to nostalgia and a great time, and I think I don't think it's all McDonald's.
It has its place, mate. We all
depends.
But it all has its place, though. We all get a cheeky McDonald's now and then when we've been out had a few drinks and we want something greasy. It has its place, but what I'm saying in terms of when you're actually judging things by their sort of like their quality, when you're thinking about like the stuff you really love, the reason a lot of people move away from pop music, I think, isn't because they suddenly think pop music is shit. It's because they discover that there's more to music and there's greater things out there. So again, it's being brought up where the best burger you're likely to get when you're 10 years old or younger is a McDonald's burger, but then you're going to get a little bit older and you're going to go to like a nice restaurant and have like a really good, like almost homemade style burger with really fresh ingredients, and it's a whole different experience, and you go, oh
yeah. And I think
I still have a place for McDonald's in my life. Like if I'm ever out drinking and it's the only place open at 1 a.m. or if I'm just feeling having a greasy day, but like if I'm ever after quality, I'm gonna go somewhere different. So pop music still has its place in the world for sure, but for me, like I said, Americana was like absolutely game changing. It changed everything. And again, when you're young, music is so much a part of your identity that it really, you forget how much it then shapes how you go forward. Like I said, the clothes I wore, the friends I kept, all came down to music in the end, and it had a huge impact on me. And it was weird because I didn't even buy the album Americana. I went to a friend's house and his sister had come back from the States with he had an older sister who'd come back from the States, and he played it for me, and I was just like, that's the best thing I've ever heard in my entire life.
It's also you're talking about your experience is very much connected to like 90s pop music as well, which is a lot there's a world of difference between a manufactured, auditioned, and put together boy band pop music of the 90s and Adele and Ed Sheeran writing their own songs and touring relentlessly now.
There's certainly been more room in recent years for proper, true artistry to creep through in the pop industry. People are a little bit more attuned to fakery, I think, and sincerity, for sure. But that doesn't mean there isn't still a fuck ton of it in the charts, though.
No, of course not. No, the charts
it still makes up the majority. It still makes up the vast majority. Your Ed Sheeran is a bit of and your Adeles, they're a bit of an accident almost. You know what I mean? You almost sort of go, God, that really shouldn't have worked. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Like a genuine artist, like somehow becoming popular seems really unlikely. But there you go. Anyway,
there was a period where it looked like last year, I don't think it was Biffy, but I know Feeder had a high charting album, and I think Stereophonics did, and Slipknot's album was #1, and it felt like guitar music was making a comeback, and then it sort of was slid back into some of the other hits, and it's like, oh, okay. But anyway, read Steven Universe comics.
Yeah, this is one of our most absurd tangents. It's so not fitting. It makes no sense, and it's taken up such a large... I'm glad this episode is overrun, because I could sort of in my head go, well, at least there might be 30-40 minutes of actual Steven Universe discussion in there.
Yeah. Hey, I warned you up top. I had hardly anything to say about the comics. If you didn't expect a boy zone tangent, then you are sadly naive.
More fool me, right? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. People knew going in. The second I mentioned Boyzone magazine, people were like, oh, fucking, this is ending with a discussion about the nuance of the word pop music.
Yeah. To be fair, though, again, we've done it in the extra time we've been given. I do think we did genuinely get 30-40 minutes of actual Steven Universe and comic discussion in there.
Yeah, you're the only person worried about this, Dan. Don't worry.
No, yeah, you're right. Anyway, the main thing I wanted to bring up before we go back on that topic. So the next episode, and I'm sad that we've filled so much with music now because no one's going to hear that this is the thing we're doing. Next episode, we're doing our top 5 Steven Universe episodes. It's hard to choose. There's a lot of really good ones. But Chris and I are going to attempt to decipher our top 5 favourites. A few little caveats. Movie does not count, number 1. And episodes that had the same title are 1 episode. So Change Your Mind, it counts as 1. Bismuth counts as 1. The Wanted arc, they're individual because they had individual titles. Arbitrary as that seems, I just thought we should establish some ground rules.
It does make a difference because Wanted would be quite high up if I could count all 4 episodes.
Exactly, but I think as each episode has its own title and its own identity, it's individual episodes.
Can I make a caveat to you and because also we're going off of a lot of these I personally have only seen once. We're going slightly off of memory and off of on reflection and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So, for anyone listening and for you, Dan, I don't friggin' want, if I make a choice, I don't want, I seem to remember when we first watched this, Chris, you said this. I don't know what I said. I can't remember. This is me looking at the episodes and instinctively going, oh yeah, I love that one. Or like Mr. Greg, I don't think I was too positive on when we first reviewed it. But on reflection and having rewatched it, I think Mr. Greg is a piece of art. So, I might choose stuff that, is different to when we first reviewed it. I feel like, for me in particular, it's a potential stick to be beaten with, and I don't want that.
I think it's really... I'm very flattered that you think there's a world where I can remember what you said about any of these episodes. I can't remember what I said about these episodes.
You've done it before.
Yeah, regularly on the rewind, the revisits when I've just gone back and listened to the podcast.
No, I feel like it's happened on the thing, and because I feel like I've said before, I don't know, but yeah. Anyway,
I think if you were to go back and check, that's very, very rare if it's happened, because I do think you're mostly thinking of when we're doing the revisit, where I've gone back and listened to our previous discussion, and been able to say. But again, mate, I didn't remember that you didn't love Mr. Greg at first. I have no memory of that at all. I don't remember any of this.
And I'm also, and like, and don't get me wrong, I'm not about to pick Watermelon Steven or the episode that must not be named involving cats.
I was going to say, there's a couple I can iconically remember but you'd remember those too. So I don't feel like I'm going to be able to like catch you out.
Right, fair enough.
My memory's not that good. I can't remember what I said about these episodes, let alone what you said.
Can we make that distinction as well? Actually, is it this is I think
personal
favorite discussion. There's a difference. I love this topic. I think about it more than I should. There is a difference between favorite and best, and we are doing our top 5 favorite episodes. That means the episodes that connect with us. It doesn't necessarily mean the episodes that we think are the best. So, for example, I think Infinity War is a better structured film than Endgame. If forced to choose my personal favourite, I'd probably choose Endgame because the fan wank works on me. So it's that kind of thing. Yeah. We're doing favourite.
But it's not just us, Chris. And this is what I'm excited about, and what I'm really sad now no one will have gotten this far in the podcast to hear because of our music discussion. You guys are involved too. We'll be doing my favourite, Chris's favourite, and your top 5, as in the listener, you person listening right now. Yeah, I see you looking around, thinking, God, can he see me? Yeah, I can. I'm right behind you. Boo! No, okay, that was weird. Sorry, I don't know what happened. I think I just lost my mind for a minute. But you can get involved. There's a link in the description of this episode. If you find this on the YouTube channel, the link's there. I'll probably tweet it out as well. So if you head to my Twitter at Dan Doolan, you can probably see this link there too. You'll be able to go to a SurveyMonkey survey. I guess I just was looking for another word because I don't want to use the word SurveyMonkey survey. Where you can basically rank them. It's a little awkward, because if you choose to drag one of the episodes, it then automatically ranks everything in the order it currently is, making them in episode order. Don't drag them. Just, there's a drop-down box, you click it, you choose the number for that episode. So you can rank. What's great about it is you can rank as many as you like. Some people I've posted it on the Discord. We've had a handful of responses already. I think we've had 10, 11 responses already from the Discord. What people have been most doing is quite varied. Some people have gone through and worked out their ranking for all 170 odd episodes.
Wow. And
gone through and numbered each one. Some people have just done their top 5. Some people have done their top 20. Some people have done like a top 50. Like I've seen all sorts of rank as many as you feel like. I assume
if people don't want to use that as well, they can just comment like on the YouTube link for this with their top 5 as well if they want to.
They can, but it won't. When we do the episode, and I'm saying my 5th favorite is this, Chris's 5th favorite is this, and then I'm going to go to the fans' favorite. SurveyMonkey's calculating that for me based on the responses. So if you put them in the YouTube comment, they're not going into that algorithm.
Right. Okay.
Because I'm literally going to be able to compile.
Right. So you're not gonna go. Cram's top 5 is da da da. It's literally the audience's top 5.
Yeah. Oh no, because otherwise that would take forever. I mean, as much as nice as that would be, it'd take forever. I'd take far too long. So we're gonna get the listeners' feedback compiled all together and figure out what you guys think are the best episodes. Based on the first sort of responses, there's some very clear patterns emerging. Already, and that's very interesting. So yeah, I'm super excited about doing this, and I hope everyone gets involved and follows the link and votes for their at least top 5. I think that would be really fun. If you could just remember what episodes you sort of immediately come to you as your favourites for your top 5, feel free to just click on that link. Just take a minute or two and do it. Anyone who wants to get more involved and rank further than that, you're also welcome to. It does help the overall calculations for what the listener top 5 is. Little spoiler. Actually, no, I'm not even going to say what's top at the moment because that might skew people. I'm just going to leave it like that. But it's very interesting to see what's there.
I take it we're including future.
We are including future. Yes, sorry, that was one of the other caveats I forgot to mention. Yes, so we are including future. But like I said, the movie is not included because it doesn't feel comparable to the show. And as I said, stories that only have one title count as one. But the individual episodes of, for example, Wanted are individual episodes. So there you go. I'm very excited. So yeah, come back in a couple of weeks' time for that. We're gonna be going through it, and I expect. I'm hoping. Historically, when we've done these top episodes, I've gone mad and tried to overanalyze it, overcomplicate it, math it, basically. I'm hoping this time I can just do what Chris does, because it's a lot less work, which is just go by the heart. Just what are my favourites? Look through the list. Think about it, obviously. Chris, I'm not suggesting Chris doesn't put a lot of thought into it, but I'm suggesting that I often put too much. I often try to math it and calculate it and analyze it when I have categories and thoughts, and I'm hoping this time I don't end up going mental and doing that again. I hope I just go simple.
Especially when an analytical mind can just destroy. Like we've been rewatching the Marvel movies, and I was doing up until Age of Ultron. Afterwards I was ranking them as to what my favourite was and what I thought was the best. So again, that distinction. So for example, I think Captain America Winter Soldier is a better movie than Civil War, but I would probably say Civil War is my favourite of the two, because I just really respect what Civil War juggles and does. And I'd tell you what, mate, I was not enjoying the rewatches. I was like, and it was literally Civil War where I went, nah, fuck it, I'm not doing this anymore. Because I kept watching it, looking out for things and trying to pick holes, and like, I was like, who am I doing this for?
Right, yeah, if you were going to do a podcast about it afterwards, that would make sense.
Yeah, and I thought maybe I would do that, and like, maybe I might revisit it and, and look at the list and update it, because let's be honest, Phase 3 is mostly at the top anyway. But yeah, it was really affecting my enjoyment.
We literally just finished our thingy yesterday. We finished our Marvel rewatch. We did Far From Home last night.
Nice.
Yeah, it's good.
Nice.
Yeah, it made sense.
Yeah, it's good. I like Far From Home.
Yeah, it made sense to sort of like. It was weird actually, because yesterday was my birthday, so watching a Spider-Man movie. Because the problem is having a birthday in COVID times is there's really not a lot to do. Like a lot of the museums and art galleries are shut. I didn't want to go to a cinema because there's nothing really to see right now. So I just basically we had quite a quiet day, and ending on a Spider-Man movie is like I thought that worked out quite well. Spider-Man being my favorite hero and stuff, and Far From Home better than I remember. I enjoyed it more than I enjoyed it in the cinema, I think.
I could have sworn, I mean, this is now going to extend the podcast by about 3 minutes. I could have sworn your birthday was the 6th. I'm so sorry, because I didn't wish you happy birthday, because I thought it was tomorrow.
No, it's fine. That's fine. When we talked about it, though, because didn't we say you didn't want to do this podcast today because you were worried about doing a podcast straight after my birthday?
Fuck me, you're right. We had a whole fucking discussion. For some reason, in my head, it was the 6th. I'm so sorry.
That's okay. It's fine. It was you know what's funny? This is my first year not having my birthday on Facebook because I've deleted my Facebook, and it is very interesting how few how few people notice when you've got Facebook.
But those people, like, without sounding arrogant, those people, fuck them. I matter, and I didn't wish you a happy birthday.
It's okay.
Shit.
That's okay.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
It's okay. I wasn't trying to throw you under the bus on the podcast.
No, because you don't. I know you well enough to know, and I'm not trying to make excuses to make myself feel better for the listeners. I know Dan well enough to know that kind of stuff legitimately doesn't bother him. But I still feel like a fucking monster.
Yeah, no, that's fine. It's fine. I can't expect everyone to
Can you imagine, looking at this and going, oh, wow, an hour and 10 minutes. They must really go deep on the comics. No, just explaining the system for the top 5 episodes, me being mortified and apologising for being a shit friend, and talk about Boyzone and pop music.
Yeah, we've really let the listeners down on this one. This
might
might go down in history as our most tangenty episode.
The whole point of doing this today was so that you had your birthday. Fuck, I'm so sorry.
It's fine. I now I'm loving this because this is now very amusing.
But you must have been aware of it. You must have gone, I've not heard from Chris, or did your mind literally not even think like that?
No, No, I wouldn't expect it. Like it's nice if people think, but it's not like, you know, when I when I got when we were texting yesterday, I wasn't like, he hasn't wished me happy birthday, prick.
Shit, I even sang to Nadia on her birthday.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, that's true. That's very true.
Do you want me to sing to you now to make up for it?
I mean, no, it was super awkward when you did it for Nadia, and she didn't have to like react live as well, which would not. And also, it feels it feels hollow the day after.
I feel so shitty.
Oh, this is fun. I'm enjoying this now. This is now we're in tangent town that I'm happy. I'm enjoying. This is watching Chris squirm because he's beating himself up about forgetting a birthday.
But you know what it is, and it's not even like it's may even work. Like, check this out. There are 3 people's birthdays in September. I'm going to say this, and there'll be like 5, and like I feel like even more of a monster. There are 3 active birthdays in September that I am aware of that I need to be like aware of. Early September, yours, my dad's, and our friend Lou's. Mm-hmm. And I could have sworn my dad's was first. So now, not only am I feeling guilty about your birthday, but I'm also sat here thinking, does this mean I've also forgotten Lou's?
Oops.
I know what dad's is. I'm so sorry.
You really don't need to be. I'm now. It's quite funny because it's not a problem. I don't know. You've made it a problem for yourself.
I hope you forget mine next year. You are always one of the last, so you like me go, oh shit.
Yeah, I'm terrible. That's why maybe it doesn't bother me, because like I'm terrible for remembering birthdays. Like I'm awful for.
I'm awful.
Like,
awful.
It's fine. Like I can't. How would I ever judge someone when I've forgotten so many in my time?
I know my mum's, my dad's.
How is this podcast still going?
And I know my sister. I can have a good stab at my sisters. Even Jess's, I will often get confused for our anniversary. So,
I'm starting to think we need to add an intro to this that just says, "Look, don't get excited at the length. I promise you, we do our normal 40 minutes of Steven Universe stuff, but then there's a lot of other shit." We might have to warn people of that now.
I assumed you were going to do that anyway.
Sorry?
Right, take us home then, birthday boy.
What's that?
I said, take us home. And then I called you birthday boy because it's your birthday and I know that.
My birthday was yesterday.
Yeah, mate. When you're doing a podcast with me, it feels like an extra long. But don't be like I don't care and then be like, my birthday was yesterday.
Oh, no. I'm just saying, you can't call me birthday boy today. I've escaped that. I've escaped being called a birthday boy.
I forgot yesterday.
So now you get to do it today. All right. So it's this needs to end because it's I think it's gone past being funny. Right. Thank you so much for listening. Please go below, click the button, do the survey. If you got this far, you're a hero and a champion and a real trooper. You've just powered right through, haven't you? And I respect that. So, dear listener, thank you so much for listening. I've been Dan Doolan.
I've been Chris Billingham.
And we'll see you in
Dan a happy birthday.
And we'll see you in 2 weeks' time when we discuss our top 5 episodes of Steven Universe.